You're listening to the Global Travel Channel podcast show, a podcast that shares travel experiences from across the world. Your host for the show is Mark Philpott, ex-global corporate executive, philanthropist, publisher, filmmaker, sportsman, and serial traveler. Mark sits down with guests from across the world and talks about their up-close and personal travel experiences. And we get to understand how travel changes people's lives. Here's your host, Mark Philpott.
Yes, indeed, here I am, Mark Philpott with you, and welcome to the show. It's great to have you all here, and for the regular people, welcome back. It's always great to have you listening in. And if you're a first timer finding the show, stick with us. We've got so many exciting guests coming on the show to talk about travel and also to get a bit deeper. Yes, we don't just talk about travel destinations on the show. No. We get to know the traveller. And we find out some things that not many people know about some of my guests. That's what's really interesting on the show. I get to speak to people all across the world about all their amazing travel experiences. If you like what you hear today, leave us a review, tell a friend, a family member, or even a work colleague about the Global Travel Channel. We want to spread our positive virus around the world so more and more people get to listen to the show. Now today I have another great guest on the show. She's been to some very interesting places around the world, and we're going to focus on a few that I think you might really like, because if you haven't been there yet, you'll get a great insight to what they're actually like, and when we can all start to travel again, you might want to book a ticket. So let's get over right now and meet my guest for today. So it's a very warm welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show today to Mel Healy. Mel, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm fantastic, thank you. We've got a beautiful winter's day here today, and we've actually got two seagulls sitting on the side of the boat listening into the show this morning. So there we are. You've got
we've got a
live audience.
Really interested audience.
Whereabouts are you in the world today?
I'm in the Manning Valley, of New South Wales in Australia.
The Manning Valley, where's that?
Yeah.
I don't even know where it is.
So, do you know Foster Tun Curry?
I do indeed.
Yeah. So it's so Taree is about 4 hours north of Sydney. Mm-hmm. So this is where I grew up, my family home. So I'm back here at the moment.
Manning Valley, fantastic.
Yeah.
So folks listening around the world, we're talking about Australia, we're talking about the East Coast, and we're talking about how many hours north of Sydney?
About 4.
About 4 hours north of Sydney.
It's getting shorter every time they do some road work. So it's a pretty easy drive to Sydney from here.
It must be a very beautiful place this time of the year in particular.
Yeah, it is lovely. The Barrington tops are sort of just behind us, so there's a little smattering of snow there at the moment, and we've got the beaches, and then like the coastline, and we can kind of get to Port Macquarie, to the Queensland's not too far off. I guess it's a 7-hour drive from here, Byron Bay, that kind of. So we're in a really good pocket here.
Yeah,
really
beautiful. So you were born and bred there, were you?
No, I was actually born in Papua New Guinea, to be honest.
Oh, Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, my parents spent several years working over there. So my sister and I were both born there. But I only spent 9 months of my life there, and then we moved back here. So that's kind of where the travel started for me, I suppose. But it was pretty short-lived. Mum and Dad were there from 71 to 79, and I was born in 79. So
it was an exciting place and exciting time.
Yeah, definitely. I'd really like to. I haven't been. I'd really like to go there, but it's one of those places that, it's a bit difficult at times, and has obviously changed a lot since back then. But sometime I'll get there, hopefully.
Well, I wish I could have said to you, you're the first PNG born person on the show, but you're not. You're the second.
Can't take that one, eh? Good.
But never mind. Okay, so we'll call you part Papua New Guinean and part Australian. How's that? How's that go?
That sounds good. Sounds exotic, doesn't it?
I'm sorry I can't do the show in pidgin for you today. So
no, I wouldn't understand. It's all good. You've got seagulls there. Maybe you can try that.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. So one of the things that I do on my show is I offer my guests the opportunity to dedicate the show to someone special in their life. So who would you like to dedicate your show to today?
Oh, I've got so many special people, but actually I would really like to dedicate it to just all the travellers out there who are a bit grounded at the moment.
Yeah, beautiful.
I feel like, it's just time for inspiration, and that we will travel again. It's just maybe a little way off for now.
I've got to be honest, I'm getting a bit tired of seeing everyone's photos from their past trips of years ago.
Yeah,
I'd
me
rather see
too.
present day stuff where people are back out there again. So I'm with you on that one. I think
Yeah.
that's a great dedication to
Yeah, totally.
everybody on the show. So when you came back from Papua New Guinea to Australia to live, where did you go to live?
My parents are from Townsville originally, but we grew up in Gosford, or I spent the first 5 years of my life in Gosford, and then we moved to Taree. So we've been in this region for quite a long time now, 36 years.
Right.
So Taree is basically home. Gosford I really can't remember because I was only very little at that stage. So I started my schooling here in the Manning Valley and then continued on here until I went to Canberra for university. And I spent several years in Canberra, and then I've moved around a lot. So I've spent a lot of time in lots of different places in Australia before heading overseas about 5 years ago.
So a lot of people wouldn't have heard of the Manning Valley area. So give it a bit of a plug. Tell us what's there and why should people come and visit?
Yeah, it is a really beautiful part of New South Wales, and I think sometimes it often gets forgotten for lots of other destinations, maybe the Coffs Harbours and the Port Stephens sort of areas of the coast. But Taree and the Manning Valley, like a lot of places recently, were hit quite hard by the bushfires, but there's a lot of little enclaves around this area that are worth discovering if you haven't been to this part of the country or this part of the state. Obviously Foster Tuncurry is one of those real tourist attractors. There's some beautiful beaches there, and there's a lot going on in that part. The Great Lakes area is lovely. Old Bar particularly is a really nice little spot. It's attractive for the beaches as well. There's a lot of surfers seek that out. There's some lovely little coffee shops and some beautiful spots there. And then places like Barrington Tops, which I'm not sure if you know, they're building an Aussie Ark at the moment, which is going to be help with koala conservation and Tassie devils and things like that. So it's up in the mountains a little bit, but there really is so much to see and do here, and it probably is. I mean, there's coffee shops and restaurants and some like really kind of special people. I know there's Donna Carrier owns a cafe in Wingham called Bent on Food, which is really lovely. And there's just, I think it was bypassed a number of years ago to make that trip between Sydney and Brisbane much faster and easier. But when that happened, you didn't go through Taree anymore. So there was a little bit of conjecture as to whether that would change the place. And actually, it's probably changed it for the better because there's not as much traffic coming through and business has done pretty well. I mean, it's just, it's home for me. So I guess it holds a soft spot, but it certainly is worth coming off the highway and having a look if you're heading that, through this area.
Good place to bring a family for a holiday?
Definitely. I mean, I think Old Bar, particularly Foster, it depends. I mean, there are obviously busy spots. During the holiday peak periods, it's always pretty busy in those areas. Like I would say if you're travelling through and doing a road trip like a lot of people will be doing this year and maybe into next year, it's certainly worth coming in and seeing what we've got to offer here, particularly the Manning Valley and the Barrington Coast itself, because there are just so many places to see and so many, lovely spots to camping. There's a lot of camping grounds, Harrington, those sorts of places are just really nice to stop into and have a wander and fish and chips and lots of parks and things like that. So I would definitely say family orientated, but anyone really. The people are really friendly. It's a warm place. The climate is really good, and it gets a bit nippy in winter, but certainly not like the southern states do. So I would certainly say definitely check it out. If you haven't been in here before, do it. These places, particularly places like Old Bar and Nabiac and areas like that were hit quite hard by the fires, really need support just like everywhere else does. It's just that they're not perhaps seen as a great marketing tool for a lot of the bigger kind of destination companies at the moment, but they're certainly worth coming to for sure.
Yeah, that's a great reminder, and I get asked quite often by people who listen to the show about what's it like now after the bushfires and all the rest of it, and the fact is that a lot of these places are still really hurting, and if you are coming to Australia, it'd be a great idea to spend some time in the lesser known places to help these communities get back on their feet again, because some of them are still struggling very hard. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. You actually got me when you said fish and chips. So
I know.
I think that I'll be packing up the dog and we'll be making a trip down that way sometime soon.
Yeah, it really is a great spot to come and visit. And certainly, you know, there's been so many hits this year with the bushfires and now COVID-19 and just so many things that have just one after the other kind of battered the area. So if you are on the road and you do see those signs, certainly stop in and see what you can find. There's definitely something for everyone.
Wonderful. There you go, folks. There's a good wrap for the area. So Mel's not, I don't think you're paid by the local tourist commissioner.
No, not at all. No,
Okay.
I've come back after quite a long time away, and I'm just seeing it in a completely different way again, I guess.
That's often the case, though, isn't it? You know, you go away from somewhere and you come back and you do see it in different lights after you've experienced other places.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, like I said, I've been overseas, and I spent 4.5 years in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, and while I enjoyed that time, it really made me appreciate home and my family and where I come from and where we live in this country, because there's just a lot of things that you don't realise until you have spent time away that you really do appreciate when you come back. So, you know, you hear people complain about little things and you just think, really? No. This is amazing. Like, just to be here and have the freedoms that we have, even though we've had some of them tested this year. We certainly are really lucky to be Australian and be in this part of the world, I think.
I think that's a wonderful statement to make, and there's so much to be said about travelling, because when you go and do see other parts of the world and you come home, you do become more knowledgeable in terms of how lucky you are to be in a place like Australia.
And I also think how, you know, the perspective that the rest of the world has on our country and the people in it, and you know, when you meet and experience other people and you find out their background and you come across all sorts of different people with different stories, you're always greeted as an Australian wherever you are with warmth, and they all say, oh, you're Australian, oh, that's amazing, you're such lovely people, and you know, they really want to talk to you. So I think that's a tribute to our native people as well. You know, it's nice to be warmly welcomed and thought of nicely by other people, but it's also nice to be reminded that we are really great people here, and we do we tend to embrace everybody. We tend to see everyone's points of view, which I think is really important as well, and I particularly noticed that when I was away.
There you go, people. Australians are lovely.
And if travel doesn't teach us something, then you're doing it wrong, you know.
That's so true as well, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I was really looking forward to having a chat with you today, because combining travel writing and travelling is something I'm really interested in, as are a lot of the listeners that I've got listening to the show. So let's start talking about, first of all, your first overseas experience after you came back from New Guinea and you were based in Australia for a while. Do you remember when you went back overseas again for the first time?
Yeah. Do you know, it was like, I would say it was 2001 maybe, so not really that long ago, I guess, but in the scheme of things, I guess that's 20 years now. I went to America of all places, so it wasn't overly, I've been lucky enough in all of the jobs I've had along the way to come across some pretty incredible people from lots of different walks of life and lots of different places. And when I studied in Canberra, I ended up working for the Canberra Cannons NBL club back when it was in operation, and it was a foundation club. And I met a lot of Americans and just, you know, lots of people from lots of different places, and a couple of really good friends that I made there lived in the States. So I went and did a trip that took in Atlanta, and I was supposed to go to Louisiana, but actually the hurricane came through just before, so I wasn't able to actually get there. But I went to New York and San Francisco and stayed with the mum of one of the colleagues I had at the basketball in Vallejo, and did like a homestay with her and did lots of traveling at that point. And then, I mean, back then, you know, I guess my parents, having traveled and spent time in New Guinea, gave me a sense of, you know, nothing was impossible and that you could go and do anything if you wanted to. So while America was sort of back then, I guess it was, I didn't really want to spend, I went straight from school to work, and and straight into the workforce. So I didn't really take that gap year like everybody else sort of did, and I didn't go and do Europe straight off the bat. I kind of went to America, did that, came back, always saved my money for a big trip every year, and it's really just circumstance that kind of led me on the continued path, I suppose, because it's like jobs, you know, the people that you meet along the way is where you end up finding your next stint somewhere else. And then it's just a matter of networking, or the people that you meet that end up taking you in an entirely different direction. And a lot of the places I've been to weren't really on my list to go to necessarily, they just ended up coming up at the time, and off I went. So I mean, America was the start, and then from there I kind of just never stopped. And I basically did that on my own. I didn't do any tour or anything. I just sort of said hey to the people that I knew, and ended up jumping on a plane by myself, and off I went.
So how was it landing in the land of, the brave and glorious in America for the first time, and going to places like New York City and Atlanta, which are, huge cities compared to coming out of a place like Canberra in Australia?
Yeah, I felt small, I guess. Like, the world is so big, and I'd seen all these places in movies and on TV and stuff, and I guess it's like any time you go traveling, I suppose, you sort of pinch yourself that you're there, and in the time that you're there it feels a bit like a dream, and then when you get home you think, oh wow, I did that. I went and did that, and actually that was quite brave of me to do it. I don't know how old I was. I probably was only 19 at that stage. But yeah, no, it was amazing. Like, I mean, I've got stories to tell like everyone does. I had a friend who'd teed up an apartment in New York for us to stay in, and then when I arrived, I was arriving before another friend of mine, and this girl had been living in New York, but she wasn't going to be there at the time. And when I got there and called her, and actually she told me that it wasn't available and I couldn't stay there, and I didn't have anywhere else to stay. So I was like, oh, I'm in New York. I don't have anywhere to stay. It's really expensive. I didn't have a lot of money. I was like, and I thought, it's okay, I'll sort it out. So I don't know, I think I rang home and asked, could someone help me with some money, and went and stayed in a hotel opposite Madison Square Garden in the end. But, those sorts of things are what makes you resilient and makes you know that you can just about handle anything. So it was fun to just go and see all these, and to realise how far away from home you were. But again, being Australian was nice to be Australian, because actually I think, I'm not sure if it's that trip or another trip, I ran into Paul Harrigan somewhere in the States, and it's that instant connection with someone when they speak and you hear the Aussie accent, that you kind of form friendships and all of that. But no, I really love the States, and I've been back a couple of times since, but I would really love to go back again. It's just that there's so many other places to tick off the list, I guess.
That's the problem,
and
isn't
I've
it?
changed a lot since then too, I guess. 19 versus 41.
Yeah.
What I would have enjoyed doing back then, sort of, I've done all those kind of obvious tourist attractions, and so now it's sort of time to delve into those other places that perhaps are a little bit less obvious and a little bit more enticing.
Did you fall in love with New York?
You know what, I preferred San Francisco over New York. I loved New York, but yeah, I don't know, I guess maybe because I came from a coastal town in Australia, and I just like the more laid back kind of nature of San Fran, and New York was a bit uptight for me, I guess. But I liked it. I mean, I didn't have the money to splash around to go and do all the amazing things that you would love to do, but no, I loved it. I mean, New York's New York, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So you preferred the Californian vibe versus the
totally.
bit upbeat of the city, yeah?
Yep.
That's
I
cool.
liked San Fran. I would love to live there, but it's just not going to happen, I don't think.
So you were working with a basketball team in Canberra, and travel writing came into your life. When did that all happen?
Geez, that didn't really happen until I went on. Well, no, that's not fair. I would say I came into my own with travel writing when I went to Abu Dhabi, and that was again just circumstance. But earlier on in the piece, so I've spent a lot of my working life in newspapers, and I spent 5 years on the Gold Coast and a couple of years in Brisbane before I headed overseas. And in the time that I was on the Gold Coast, I wrote I was a Saturday editor of the paper and did a lot of the features work and things within that job. And I was lucky enough then to be sent to Dubai. That was the first time I went to Dubai in about 2009. And that was on a famil I think we stayed in Atlantis, the Palm, and did, a lot of the touristy stuff. I don't think the Burj Khalifa had opened at that point, so we didn't get to see that. But I was lucky enough to be sent on that trip, and I also got sent to Hawaii during that time as well. So I guess back then there was still, those sort of trips were still floating around. So I was able to write those stories for the publication that we put out, and we also put out another magazine during that time. And then I spent some time also, my brother-in-law is South African, so we went to Kruger National Park for a Christmas during that period when I was in Queensland, and I was able to write 2 sort of double page spreads on my trip and the experiences that I had there as well, which was it was basically just a passion then. I was doing a lot of editing work and not a great deal of writing, but I was given the opportunity to do that and was also managing the schedule at that point, so that was kind of handy. And then I worked with, prior to that I'd worked in Mackay, and I worked with a colleague up there who had made a move to Dubai after we'd worked together, and had been at me for years to get over there and just experience what there was to see in Dubai. And after about 5 years of her insisting that I come, there was a job come up with her as her deputy editor of a section within the English language newspaper in Abu Dhabi. And from that time onwards, I became really close friends with the travel editor, and I was willing to, as most Australians are when they work, just about do anything and help out if I was needed at, if someone needed help with something, I would always do it. And I think that work ethic then lent itself to me being rewarded with trips, and which required then for me to write reviews and stories and that kind of thing. And they were published in the paper and in the magazines that we produced, and from there it just it became more of a passion, and I was given more opportunity. And because of the location of the Emirates themselves, I mean, it's only a 4-hour flight to the Maldives, it's only a 4-hour flight to Sri Lanka. There are so many, you could get to Greece in 6 hours, so it was sort of a weekend proposition most of the time. Where will I go next? What will I do next? So like I said, it's sort of just the direction in which I went that kind of created the opportunities, and I just took them always.
Was there a role model or inspiration to get into travel writing?
No, I'm not sure that there was really. I mean, I've just always had ambition, and I wasn't happy enough at the end of my schooling to just stay here and get a job at the local supermarket or the local Big W, one of the big shopping complexes opened in Taree when I finished school. I went off to university, and I didn't just go to Newcastle, I went to Canberra, so actually I couldn't come home for the weekends like everybody else could if they lived closer. So I think it was just my journalistic vibe as well. Like I always wanted to know more, I always wanted to find out what else there was. So I always watched the travel shows, I always dreamed of all these amazing places. I probably never would have imagined I would be where I am now, but I always wanted to, and I'm pretty determined when I get my mind set on something. So I just keep doing, I guess. I mean, the Anthony Bourdains of the world and the people like that, Attenborough, all those types of people are, I would love to be able to do that. And actually, niche or specialist journalism just doesn't really exist that much anymore. It's changed a lot. The industry has changed to a point where everyone's got to be able to do everything. So to be privileged enough to be able to do this, it's not, I mean, I have to say it's a bit risky and it's a bit ad hoc. You don't know where you're going to get your next job from. But through the travel editor in Abu Dhabi, I was given the opportunity then to write some hotel reviews for the Telegraph in London because they needed someone in Abu Dhabi to do that for them. So again, I just kind of, it was just a question that was asked of her, and she asked me would I be interested in doing it, and then I started to do it, and then other trips came up. So yeah, I guess it's just all a matter of circumstance in the end, and a passion for, you know, knowing more and doing as much as I can in a short amount of time. I knew I wasn't going to probably be in the Emirates forever, and I just sort of felt a real need to see as much and do as much as I could because I know how far away Australia was. So yeah, I guess that's how it came to be in the end.
You call yourself a destination specialist. How does one get such a label?
I would say you just need to spend some time in a specific spot, and for me, Abu Dhabi was. It's not. I mean, it's not small by any stretch. It's actually the capital of the Emirates. So most people think Dubai is, but Abu Dhabi is the capital, and it is reasonably small when it comes to what hotels there are or what places there are and who you connect with and who the PR people are and all of that. So you just need to know and find out as much about the place as you can, and then because it's I think because it's perhaps a little bit unknown and not as bright lights as Dubai, it doesn't get as much attention as Dubai does. So there weren't as many people, I guess, interested in knowing as much as there was to know about Abu Dhabi. So in that regard, you know, I chose to go and work in Abu Dhabi, not Dubai, which is where most people end up. So, you know, from there, I ended up getting contacted from places like the Times in London and asked could I do some stories on the Emirates for them because I was there, and you know the Formula One was there, and so I got asked to do stories on the luxury side of the GP and things like that. So I guess it's just knowing a place and really being interested enough to want to know everything there is to know about it. And I mean, you don't necessarily have to spend a decade there. You just have to. I know there's a lot of people that tend to go to these places and sometimes don't get out as much as they could. But I mean, every time there was an opportunity to go and do something, I would do it. You know, across Dubai and Abu Dhabi, because there just aren't the things like dinner in the sky that they do in Dubai here for you to do. And that was just something that was offered to me through my job. So there's just far greater opportunity probably in media in general, in terms of experiences and things like that perhaps you wouldn't get back here.
You've talked about how significantly different the travel writing industry is today compared to a decade ago. What do you think it's going to look like in the next 10 years?
That's a really tough question. I've been someone who's had a foot in both camps, newspapers and the digital side of things, and I've completely embraced the digital side of journalism because I know, you know, anytime someone said, do you want to be trained how to upload stories to the web? Do you want to be trained? I would always say yes, because as much as I have always loved newspapers and have always, you know, have a soft spot for them, I know that they're probably not going to sustain through future decades, and that's being seen now, I think. But from a digital point of view, I would hope that journalists are still respected and regarded, and that areas like mine here in Taree are given, you know, proper coverage, because, you know, I think while there's a lot of influences out there, and maybe this whole COVID thing has kind of taken that air away a little bit, and I certainly don't detract from that side of journalism and that side of travel writing and travel you know, promotion and all of that. Those of us that have trained journalists, it's sort of become a bit wishy-washy as to, you know, I've been on trips with 9 influencers and 1 journalist, and I was the journalist, and, you know, like, these days you could proclaim to be a writer and not actually be able to spell and just post pictures on a site, you know. So I would hope that there's still going to be a bit of respect and a bit of but I don't know. I mean, it's a hard question, isn't it? Because websites and news online only exists by advertising, and advertising always kept newspapers and magazines going, but it's the views you get online that translate to advertising, and I just don't know. I mean, that's a really tough, difficult way forward, I think. I just don't know. I know there's always going to be a need for news and travel news, and I think anyone who really wants to travel will always find a way to do it. And sharing that with other people is really important, because there are so many destinations in the world that perhaps haven't been seen in the way that they should be, and the perception and the lack of understanding of a lot of places particularly is something that I'm passionate about. But yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a sad day when you can't pick up a paper or a magazine and sit down with a coffee and really pore over the pages and the photographs. But I would say that at some point it'll all be online, and I guess those of us like me are already trying to adapt to it. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's a tough one. I think it's a tough one for everyone, and I think that's something everyone in the media industry currently is struggling a little bit with so many job losses.
Well, I'm going to make a prediction, and I'm going to say it right here on my show today, and that is that I think that the magazines and the newspapers and all the rest of it are going to make a massive comeback like vinyls have in the music world.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we're gonna see people. It's going to go. Everything goes in cycles. You know, fashion goes in cycles, and we've got so much fake news out there at the moment that people are getting sick and tired of it. And I think that if you produce good content, it doesn't matter what genre you're in, people are going to go after good content. So I think it's going to come down to the individual being able to produce it.
Yeah, quality journalism, there's a lot to be said for quality, and you can usually pick apart the things that don't have the quality to them. So I really hope that's the case, because, you know, I know a lot of, I'm proud to say I feel like I'm a very passionate journalist who has seen a lot of people who are very skilled and very qualified lose their jobs. But yeah, if I could, I'd start my own just magazine that was even just an e-magazine, I guess. I mean, I just think there's still a lot of need for content and a lot of need for proper real-time news. I know from the times when I started in journalism, you know, sitting at a pub or at a cafe was where you got your story. Nowadays, it's Twitter said this, but how do we know that Twitter actually is right about it? You know, it's like that sort of thing that we just can't take as gospel. You need to actually go and experience something and be ethical about how you write about it. You can't just say that it's amazing because you got it for free or because you were paid to say it was amazing. You have to, there's for me, there's people that are paying, they might have one holiday a year and that's their money that they've saved up for all year. I'm not prepared to tell them that something is really incredible if it's not. You know, like, whereas I think on the other side of the coin there are a lot of people that do it for a commercial purpose, and whether it's good or not, they wouldn't say so. So I think that's the difference. You really want to know that you can trust what you're getting.
I think we've also got to be acknowledging the balance in this conversation as well, because there's a number of influencers and YouTube vloggers out there that are in the traveling scene that are doing an amazing job.
Definitely.
Like, they're doing really, really good stuff. So I guess it's all progression, right? And what I've seen in the YouTube world is that, you know, the cream rises to the top and there's a lot of burnout, there's a lot of fallout, and ultimately you end up with the ones that probably should be there in the end, right?
Yeah, totally. And they're the ones that, you know, if they've got access to all sorts of different things and they've actually, you know, they go out and experience it and they've got a lot of followers. Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think that it becomes obvious who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. And certainly there has to be progression. We can't hold back. Like, we can't ignore the fact that multimedia in the digital world is upon us. And I think it's really exciting in that way. I just don't know how, from a financial point of view, that companies go about doing that. But anyway, I'm still really excited about it. So I'm just forging ahead anyway, and I'll do whatever I can to keep producing quality copy. And if everyone does the same thing, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, well, let's start talking about traveling, because people are burning to get out there again. And probably burning's not a good word to use, but people are excited to get out travelling again, and I've decided to choose a couple of destinations you've been to because one, a lot of people I know who listen to my show want to go there who haven't been there, and then the second one's a kind of a left field one that I've pulled out that not a lot of people have heard about or even probably know where it is. So let's talk a bit about those. But before we do, I just wanted to ask you, when you're choosing a destination to go to for yourself and it's not work related, what process do you use to go through to choose where you're going to go next?
Do you know, there's certain places on my list, I guess, and like I said earlier, they've changed because I've been moved in different directions, and sometimes that when I've been offered a particular trip or something like that, I've usually tacked on the end of it my own time somewhere nearby, or just to make sense of doing that travel. I usually, do you know what, I try to go for places that perhaps aren't saturated with interest or people, and I like them to be of interest to me. I like different cultures. I found a trip I did to Morocco probably the most incredible I've done, and that was because I stayed with a family of a friend who was Moroccan, and I got to experience it firsthand. So I really like seeing it from a completely, probably like a normal way, rather than, I know with a lot of the travel that I've done that a lot of the time you don't know whether you're getting treated a certain way or whether it's how it really is. But when I choose a destination, I normally, depending on where I am and what I'm doing at that stage, and the seasons usually come into it, I'm more of a, not really a snow type person, not really a cold weather type person. So I've gone to a lot of places that are beachy and sunny and warm and beautiful. And being a keen photographer too, I like to take pretty incredible pictures. So I always think about whether or not I'm going to get some amazing shots out of it as well.
Cool.
I don't know. From here, I've just got some bucket list things, and I guess they're things that I'll have to work on for the longer term. And then in the shorter term, at the moment, Australia, I was putting Australia a bit more on the back burner because I was going to be spending more time overseas. But I haven't been to Uluru yet, and I really want to do that. So that's probably a bit almost opposite to what I just said, because it's a place that a lot of people want to go to. But yeah, I tend to also, obviously, like a lot of people do, you need to consider a budget and whether or not a place is within that, and where you would want to stay and what you would want to do, and whether or not you can afford it. The Arctic is on my list. I've got a friend who I went to university with who's living at the very top in a very small town of very small number of people, where it's dark most of the time, and her kids go to school there, but they've been sent home a couple of times because there's been polar bears terrorizing them outside. So I just really, that is something I really want to do, and I want to go and spend a month or two with her and write about it. So that is kind of a bucket list destination. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I guess I just do what most people do. I tend to like to plan, so I don't do things on a whim generally. But I know a lot of people who do. They just look up and see when there's a really great deal on something. And I worked with people who used to sit on Skyscanner constantly, and there'd be a really great deal. One of my friends went from Abu Dhabi to back home to the States for something like $300 US because there was a really great deal on it. I think you've just got to have, a list of places that you would like to see, and then work out whether or not it's doable.
So you're telling me there's no polar bears in Manning Valley?
No, unfortunately. No.
Go to the other end of the planet to see them.
Yeah, isn't it?
Right,
but
the first destination I want to talk to you about is the Maldives.
Yep.
And a lot of people who listen to the show have kind of got it up there on their bucket list as the place they want to go to, because they've seen all those amazing photographs. Now, for people listening today, the Maldives, they lie southwest of Sri Lanka and India. Mm-hmm. Yep. They have a population of around about 380,000 people, and they consist of 26 different atolls. The capital is Mali. And it is a beautiful part of the world, isn't it, Mel? So tell us about your experience in going to the Maldives.
So I, like everybody else, all of these places, Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius, all of those kind of bucket list beautiful destinations were all on my list too, but they sort of weren't really on the radar as much until I went to Abu Dhabi, and then they were only a 4-hour flight away. And I kind of bucked the trend a little bit because I'm not married, don't have children, so I went to these places on my own, which again provides for a completely different experience to going with someone, a loved one or a family or whatever. I stayed on a couple of different atolls in 2 different resorts. So I stayed in an Amari resort and an outrigger resort in my time there. These weren't personal trips, they were trips that I did for work. So actually I was hosted by these resorts. So in that regard, bear that in mind when I'm speaking, because, you know, a lot of the time, if you went on your own, it would be an entirely different experience. But it is as beautiful as you see in the pictures and you dream about. It is very isolated though. So, I mean, it's probably one of those places most people would know. You would go there to do pretty much nothing, just laze around and appreciate the crystal clear waters and the beautiful sandy beaches. There are obviously activities to do in those places. If you're looking to do it not so expensively, like the places, I mean, there's obviously really amazing luxury resorts there. That I've got a friend who's a marketing manager of Niama Resort, and at the moment they're offering the whole resort be booked out. If you want to, one person could book the whole resort out so that they're secluded and don't have to deal with anybody else at the moment, being it's COVID time. But the places that I stayed, yeah, they were lovely, and they were a boat ride from Mali. So, you know, there are resorts and hotels in Mali that you can stay in and do island hopping day tours to the atolls in that area. So actually that's another option if you wanted to, you know, perhaps do that rather than going and spending, you know, a lot of money in just one resort. It depends on what you're really going for.
What would you say is the ideal duration of a holiday to the Maldives? How long do you think you should go there to stay?
I would say you need at least 4 days. I mean, I went for 4 days, so I did 2 nights in each resort. So you could do it that way. I mean, I would say if you wanted to see, it's all, without sounding like it's all the same, it depends on the resort you go to, obviously, but every resort that you're on, the water's the same, the reef's there, you snorkel and get in your glass bottom kayaks and, you know, do your stand-up paddleboarding and all that. So, but if you wanted to change, if you wanted to just unpack your bags and not have to go anywhere for a couple of days, then I would stay in the one resort. If you wanted to see something different, which is really only going to be what sort of resort you're staying in, then you could do 2 nights, or you could do a couple of days in Mali and 2 nights at one of the atoll resorts. It's only a 4-hour flight from Dubai, so actually if you can get a decent flight to Dubai and then, you know, want to mix it up by going and doing that for a few days. But I mean, it is an amazing destination, and I certainly wouldn't talk it down. But Australia is, you know, like the Whitsundays and places like that are just as beautiful, I think. I sort of expected there to be this otherworldliness about the Maldives, but actually you could almost be anywhere. It's just that you know that you're there, if that makes any sense. So I don't know. It just, if you wanted to do it for like an anniversary or a honeymoon or something like that, it's ideal.
Look, what I found with the place, and I think you're right on with what you say, I think in terms of, I remember going there to write my first book, and it's a fantastic place to do something like that, where you just want to close off from the rest of the world, be in an idyllic setting, and not be bothered by anybody really, if that's the kind of place that you want to go to. But I agree with you, you know, I could have been sitting on an island in the Whitsundays or wherever doing that, but it's let's face it, it's a destination that's done a very good job at promoting itself through its visual impact, right? So
yeah, totally. And it really is that beautiful. Like, you know, when I was staying, there was another guy who had a drone back then, and I mean, this was only a couple of years ago, but drones weren't really like such a big thing then, and he put a drone up, and I mean, the images that he got from that were just sensational. And it is, I like to be on the go, seeing and doing things and feeling like I'm soaking up everything there is to see and do. So for me, beautiful, yes, but I probably would only need a couple of days, just because I like to be doing something and seeing more of what's around. And you don't really get a sense of the culture necessarily, because a lot of the people working there are working there from somewhere else. There's not a lot of, in my experience, there wasn't a lot of like Maldivian staff, and I've been to other hotels where there's been a lot of local staff, but I just felt like if you're after some a cultural type experience, no. If you just simply want to do nothing and have a really relaxed me time holiday away from everything and everyone, ideal.
So when you're going to a place and you're going there in your work capacity, how different is it for you rather than being, there in a personal thing? Are you always thinking about the job and what you need to cover off?
Yeah, I've always had people say to me, Mel, that's like so incredible that you got to do this. But the whole time that you're there, from the minute that you step off, because generally you either have someone greet you at the boat or someone who meets you on the jetty or even at the airport, and from that minute I've got to basically judge the whole experience. So when I got to one of those 2 resorts, my boat arrived and there was no one there, and I was like, okay, well, there's only one way to get to the resort, down the jetty, so I'll just and my bags had arrived and all that too. And at that time I was like, well, this is a bit strange, because normally I'd have 5 staff there waving at me or whatever, which sounds, ridiculous, but that's how it usually works when you're a media person coming to do something like that. So I was sort of like, oh, well, that's not the sort of greeting I'd expect that someone, and so from that point I was like, okay, I have to make a note of that, because if you were arriving and you spent all this money, and maybe it was because I hadn't actually spent all that money, but I sort of thought, okay, generally it's like, as a newspaper journalist, I always never read the newspaper the same way as I did before. I was that way too. So you're also very spoiled, and you need to almost differentiate between, is how they're treating you how they treat everyone, or are you just being treated that way because they know you're here? Because you can't. There are some places that you go, and it wasn't my job, this kind of thing, but there are some publications that just send you, and you just book in and they don't know who you are or where you come from, and you just get treated like a normal guest, which is almost a better way of doing it.
Undercover cop.
Yeah, or like you just pay for it and they put a disclaimer at the bottom saying this trip was paid for or was whatever by the journalist. So I always found that a bit difficult to take. Like I never really had any downtime. I was always, and they want to show you everything, so that's completely understandable. Like I do get that. So you don't actually get to go there and just like chill out for 2 days or whatever. That's not the way that it goes. You generally go and then you beck and call. Everyone's at your beck and call all the time. We've just finished your last bite on your plate and it's gone, and like there's people hovering, and it's just it is and you have to sort of talk to other guests and find out what's going on too, because you can't just be guided on your own experience. I think you have to be a little
to some degree. It's sounding to me like it's fake news, right? They're going out of their way to make sure that you have the best time, whereas we all know, right, that the reality of any travel destination and any situation is that it's like taking an airline flight. It depends on the crew on the day.
Yep.
And you can have a great flight or you can have a miserable flight, and same goes with the resorts. It's all about how they treat you on the day.
Definitely. And my job, I guess, is to cut through that a little bit and just try and, it sounds a little bit sneaky, but at times you almost have to throw the schedule out. So show up a bit earlier than they're expecting you, or request that you change the itinerary, or ask for something. There's a lot of that sort of thing that goes on, particularly hotel reviews. You have to make sure that you know, you always order something from room service and see how long it takes them to send it and whether or not you get what you ordered, and, you know, ask them something that they perhaps weren't expecting, and make sure that, because, and then you've got to judge how attentive the staff are to the other guests, because actually they're the ones that are paying. So I kind of need to know that, yeah, I mean, in that way, I feel an obligation to actually find out what it's really, really like. But it's quite hard when in a lot of the places, particularly luxury hotels, they generally circulate your photograph before you arrive. They know who you are. Every staff member greets you by your name. You know, they know everything about you before you get there. That doesn't happen with Joe Blow from.
Although it should do with the amount of money you're spending. So let's talk about the value for money in the Maldives. Is in your eyes, is it worth the money they charge for you to go there? And I want to put a precursor on this, because a lot of people think that it's such an expensive place to go, which it is. You know, I was just researching the other day, and there's, you know, the average 5-star room there is $900+ a night. But you can get $90 to $100 places as well if you look hard and search around. So in your interpretation of it all, Mel, is it a good value for money destination?
Look, I think it's like any luxury or any kind of bucket list destination. I think they do a really great job of marketing it. You're right. I think it's got a real zhuzhiness about it, just because of the name and the way that it looks and everything. The only thing that you get caught, I mean, if you stayed in Mali and you could get out and about and do, you know, get street food, or if you didn't really want to always eat in the hotel or at the restaurant, or because I think that's, if it's not all inclusive or it's only half board, and you're still going to have to spend money on food and drinks, and there's not a lot of all-inclusive, I don't think. I mean, a lot of the places are half-board or full-board, or it just depends. Look, I would say, in all honesty, I'm not really sure. I think that you could find something as beautiful for less elsewhere. And certainly, if you stayed in Mali and you just wanted to go and experience lunch at one of these resorts, or I would say you could probably buy like a day pass or something if you wanted to go and experience them. I know they do that in the UAE. But if you want to really experience it, and you really, you know, money's not really such an object, and you want to spoil yourself or spoil your partner, then yeah, I think, I mean, it is everything you see. There's not a lot that will come as a surprise, but I do think there are other places. I think maybe it's a little bit overrated.
Okay, let's move on from the Maldives. We've got our verdict on that, one way or the other. You can take what Mel says. Now we're going to go off the coast of Africa now, and we're going to go to a place called Zanzibar, where a lot of people have probably heard of Zanzibar, but you probably don't know where it is. So for those that don't know where it is, it's 40 kilometers east off the coast of Tanzania in Africa. It has a political union with Tanzania, and it's a fascinating place to go, actually. So tell us about when you went to Zanzibar, Mel.
So Zanzibar, again, was a work trip. But it was somewhere I really had always wanted to go as well. And yeah, it's sort of one of those places that I think sometimes a lot of people are a bit unsure about. And probably for good reason, but everywhere that you go is a bit like that. So it just depends. We obviously went via Dar es Salaam on the way there, and I stayed in Amelia Resort, which was a little bit away from the airport. But it really does have a lot of hidden. There's just so much about it that is enticing. Stone Town particularly is sort of the go-to in Zanzibar, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there's just so many different culture infusions in this part of Zanzibar. So it was created by the Sultan of Oman many years ago, and has, the majority of the population there is Muslim. There's a lot of different architecture there. There's like blends of Omani, Arab, Swahili, Indian and European cultural, infusions there. An interesting point to make is that Freddie Mercury was born there. So that's kind of interesting. There is a restaurant there that you can go and sort of have a little look at that bears his name. But there's a lot of just like really cool things to see there. Like the Darajani Bazaar was sort of our first stop, and it was like an outdoor marketplace where you can interact with the locals and sort of, you almost, when you go to Stonetown and you wander around, part of the appeal of the place is just getting lost in amongst all these cobbled walkways through the back of the market. There's so many like different carved doors that you can sort of walk past and see, and they're from like way back, like a lot of history in there. Like being able to try the local fruit and things like that. There's a fruit called the bungo fruit, which is like a cross between a mango, an orange and a pineapple, and they use that a lot in breakfasts, and you can just buy it, and there's like woven baskets and things like that. I would say one thing, there is a bit of disparity between luxury Zanzibar and grassroots Zanzibar. There is a lot of poverty there as well. So it's not, I felt quite comfortable walking around there, but you need to sort of be prepared to be approached by people, and it's like lots of other marketplaces where you get approached and asked to buy certain things. But that was certainly a pretty cool experience. There was lots of like tropical fruits and lots of cool souvenir type things to buy. And then just 30 minutes off the island itself is a place called Prison Island, which used to be a former prison, but it's now actually like one of the most beautiful spots for swimming. It's got a really lovely small beach, and there's some really big tortoises that they have there that are housed within the island, which is kind of cool. And actually just a boat ride over there with some of the locals, and they play music and all that kind of stuff's really, really nice. And then one spot that is really sort of a must go to, I would say, is there's a restaurant called The Rock, and it's sort of perched almost in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It's on the south end of the coast of the island. It takes a little bit to get there. We had that as part of one of our tours, but you basically get a little boat across to the steps and climb up, and then you go and sit on what is just like a building on top of the ocean, it feels like, and the view from there is just incredible. And we were lucky enough to come across the Maasai warriors as we left the restaurant that day, and we just took some pictures and spoke to them. There was also some little markets and things like that, but certainly search the Rock restaurant, because it's like one of those places that a lot of foodies tend to seek out, and we were there and there was like only us there, so it's not completely touristy and populated all the time. It's just one of those kind of quirky, you probably may not know about kind of places, and it's really worth going. They just do it, it's pretty, like, they just do it how they would normally cook their seafood and things, but you get a big seafood platter and just sit out in the sun and feel like you're the only person in the world at this restaurant. It's amazing.
Sounds great. What's the best time of the year to visit Zanzibar?
To be honest, I can't remember when I went. I don't think there's a bad time to go. I think it's a pretty good time most of the year. It's just one of those places. It's like, it seems to be sunny all the time, and the weather there was warm. Yeah, I don't think there's a bad time to go, to be honest.
And what kind of holiday experience is it? Is it best for solo travellers, couples, families? What would you suggest?
Do you know what? I think there's sort of a bit, I would say, because it also depends on the sort of holiday you're looking for, I guess. So where we stayed was a little bit further out of town, but there's also a Park Hyatt hotel right in Stonetown, like sort of almost right on the water. Look, I think you could easily take your family there. To be honest, maybe solo traveling, depending. I mean, as a woman, I don't know if I'd go there by myself necessarily. Just wandering through, it's just like, I mean, I've traveled to a lot of places on my own, and I was with a group in this instance. But yeah, I don't know. If you were just going to stay at a resort and you were just going to go on sort of like a tour or something like that, but I think you need to be, probably not on your own. I would say as a couple or as a family.
Yeah.
It's just one of those places that can change. You have to be a confident traveller, I guess.
Did you take the bus trip from Dar es Salaam to get there?
Yes.
That's about 10 hours, isn't it?
Oh, no, we didn't. No, we flew from Dar es Salaam, I think, into a little airport nearby. Yeah, no, sorry.
I was just gonna suggest, because that's, going into Dar es Salaam is probably the way that most people will go, and I was just gonna say be wary of the bus trip, because it's about 10 hours long. It's about 600 kilometres, I think, but it's a rugged journey.
No, we didn't do that. I have done some of those in other places, and yeah, you're right. It's like by the time you get there, you just think, oh god. No, I think they made sure we got there in like the
fastest way possible.
Yeah.
So value for money for Zanzibar, is it a place that you think you get good value for your holiday?
Yeah, I reckon you do, because actually, unlike the Maldives, you're not too far away from anything. Like you can choose to spend your time at the resort only and just have that kind of experience, or if you want to venture out, it's really not that far to these there's night markets as well as day markets, plenty of coastline and other parts to sort of, if you wanted to get out and see other things. I think it's just perhaps got a little bit more, it's a broader cultural immersion kind of a holiday. And, just watching the local kids out on the beach, kicking the soccer ball around and doing backflips and acrobatics and all that kind of stuff at sunset is pretty incredible to see. They've got a really vibrant personality, and even when we were walking through the cobbled streets in the back blocks of Stone Town behind the markets, there was just like little kids with, you'd hear giggling and look up, and they were just like giggling and laughing and smiling and like waving at you from a little window up the top. It's just a nice, it is one of those places that's not often thought about, that's for sure. But I would certainly say if you're considering going to that part of the world, it's worth a look, because it's got the coastal vibe, but it's also got the culture, and just interesting architecture, and you feel like you're somewhere else, which I think I really love when I'm traveling.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, good wrap up there. We've rushed through our time today. It's been great listening to you, but I've got a couple of random questions to end up with for you today.
Mm-hmm.
What has all this travel that you've endured so far in your life, what's it taught you about yourself the most?
Oh, wow. It's taught me that I'm actually pretty amenable to any situation, really. Like, I've grown as a person so much since I've done all this traveling. I'm very independent. I would go just about anywhere without any worry, and I certainly doesn't bother me doing it alone if I needed or wanted to, and that my way or our way is not the only way. There are so many different cultures in the world, and that mutual understanding and willingness to embrace other people and other cultures is really important to me, considering I've lived in an Arab country and I've heard and seen a lot of the misunderstanding in relation to another culture. There's just so many, it takes all kinds of people to make a world, and I think I've just learnt that even though I might have an opinion on something, it's not necessarily right or wrong.
Good one. If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing?
Do you know, way back when I wanted to be a fashion designer, which was a very ambitious dream. I'd like to be a professional photographer, I suppose. I don't do that professionally, but I really, really enjoy doing it. And I got into journalism because I really loved writing, and I still do. So I hope that I can continue to do that in some capacity somewhere along the way. I'm a real coffee lover, so if that opportunity came up, I'd really love to kind of open a cafe somewhere beautiful and be able to tell travel stories and have all my travel memorabilia up and share it with everyone. I just feel like, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that just don't know how amazing the world is outside of our own confines, and maybe they don't have the opportunity to, but it certainly makes me feel like I've lived a pretty decent life, and I've visited lots of different places and done lots of different things, and I haven't finished yet.
Fantastic way to end the show today. Mel Healy, thank you very much for joining me on the Global Travel Channel podcast. It's been great having you on the show, and you've now finished your first ever podcast show, so congratulations on that.
Thank you for having me. It's been fantastic.
And we'll get you back at some stage, because I'm sure once we start travelling all again, you'll have some more stories to share with us. So I'd love to have you back on the show. And for the meantime, stay well and look forward to more travels.
Yes, you too. Thanks very much.
Well, that was Mel Healy talking to me here on the Global Travel Channel podcast, and that was a fantastic episode. Thank you, Mel. I am now well aware of where the Manning Valley is in Australia, so thank you for introducing me to another new destination in the world. I hope you all enjoyed that particular episode. If you did and you want more of the Global Travel Channel, it's really easy, folks. All you've got to do is head on over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. You can listen till your heart's content. There's over 150 episodes there for you to listen to. And if you're a person that likes to download them and listen to them a little bit later in your own time, then you can do that as well. All you've got to do is go to places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Radio, iHeartRadio. They're all there. They're all listed on our website as well to make it easier for you to find. If you like our episode, please tell someone about it. Word of mouth is one of the best ways of spreading news about a podcast, so we really enjoy it when you tell somebody else about our particular podcast. Lots of people have found us that particular way. And if you're looking for something else from us, well, we do another podcast as well. It's called the Global Business Podcast. And if you're a business owner or a business employee or a business leader, then you can find out all sorts of things about what's going on in the business world right now. So we talk to people about what strategies they're using to get out of COVID-19, how they're innovating their business, all good stuff for us to share and learn around the world during these difficult times. So there you go. You've got a choice. You can either listen to us talking about travel or listen to us talking about business, all there on the show notes that we're going to give you today. Okay, well, that's it for this particular episode. Thank you very much for giving us your time and listening in today. My name is Mark Philpott. Until we meet again next time on the Global Travel Channel podcast, I wish you all very safe travels and a very happy week ahead.